Hi, everyone. This is Talk Back. It's Tuesday, October 19th, 2021. Let's think back. Most of you are not old enough, as I am, to think back to 1961. What do you do if you're graduating from Bayside High School in Bayside, New York City, and you need a job for the summer? Well, if you're a kid from Little Neck, New York, which I was back then, and you're getting ready to go to college in September, where are you going to get a job? Guess what? In the Catskills. And there I was at Camp Chickalack in Youngsville, New York, right near Grossinger's Hotel. And today I'm so happy to have the pleasure of speaking with a great guy, Mort Segal. We're going to introduce him right now. Here he is on the screen coming on. Hi, Mort.
How you doing? Hi, Sheila.
Hi, it is wonderful to see you. You're in Cedar Grove, New Jersey now, but you have a wonderful story about life in the Catskills, your life as a young kid, and then working with your dad, who was a very, very famous agent for entertainers who performed in the Catskills. So let's start. Give us a little introduction to you. How old are you, Mort? Where were you born, and where did you grow up?
Okay, I was born in Brooklyn, moved to Jersey when I was 6 years of age, and today I'm 92, and just about 92 and a half, if you want to be technical. So I started in the Catskills when I was 14. That was in 1943. It was easy to get a job because the war was on. They were looking for people, anyone that could use their hands or their mouth to help in the kitchen or in the dining rooms of the hotels that had a growth spurt during the war years. So that's the way I got started. And when I was 17, I was able to get a license in Monticello, New York, and I started driving my car. And I helped my dad transport performers all around the Catskills. And eventually I became an agent and worked with my dad in booking of the hotels and distributing carrying the entertainers to where they had to go, figuring out how to get them there, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of the entertainers became very close friends, and some of them were just as entertainers. But I always include them in my talks because they are the ones that help create the Catskills.
Okay, so your dad was the big guy. He was the man who created an agency that uh, put booked many of the famous comedians that we've all heard of, and we'll get to that when we look at the great slideshow you've put together. He booked people, and you got to meet all those exciting people, and it was an interesting time. So many families from New York City, mostly, right? Maybe parts of New Jersey, but mostly from New York, coming up to the Catskills for a week at a big hotel or a medium-sized hotel, or for the whole summer at a bungalow colony, right? Talk about the various different kinds of places there were, almost thousands of them back then. In those years, we're talking what, 40s, 50s, and 60s?
Correct. That's really my golden years. And those are the years that I basically worked there. Those are the years I enjoyed. Those are the years that I would like to go back to see again. Unfortunately, it's not going to happen. It'll never be what it was before. But it's important for everyone to know, and for you to know if you didn't know, how the Catskills, as we know it, really started. And you were pretty close when you said 1,000 hotels. It started out when I worked. It said there was about 500 hotels, but someone did a survey around 1990, and it turned out there were 1,174.
Wow. 1,174 hotels.
Yes,
That's
rooming,
amazing.
and rooming houses. And people doubt it, but they printed out the list, and I carry it around with me anytime I give a talk because it's done.
Right. Um, yes, so we'll
Holidays.
talk about that when we
Yeah,
see your slideshow.
right, right. And about my dad, fame of the uh, Bookers, the Agents Society, for starting the careers of Buddy Hackett, background information for the movie Broadway Danny Rose. So we go way, way back in the entertainment field. We go way, way back in historical thing of the Catskills. And a lot of people didn't know that the Catskills really started because of anti-Semitism. Jews were not allowed in the early days, in the 30s, whatever, to stay at any of the hotels. They had the money. They started to have some money. Times were getting good because of the war years, and they wanted to go some places. A lot of the hotels had signs on the lawn that said, "No Jews, no Hebrews, no dogs, no consumptives." And finally, a couple of people that had the money bought a couple of hotels out, turned them over, and they were smart. They put a lawn on their sign that said dietary laws observed. So Jewish people know that that hotel was okay for them to go to. And all of a sudden, the hotels took off. They took off, and it became a great environment for Jewish people to go, to stay with their own kind, so to speak, and also to have the food that they were used to having. So that's really how it started. A lot of people don't know that.
Okay, well, uh, you described very well how the Catskills got started as a resort area and went on for many years. And then we'll also get to this later when we do our slides. I love the way you expressed it. 3 A's. There were 3 A's that made changes to why the Catskills disappeared. Right. And everything kind of went out of business and went down. Airplanes, air conditioning, and assimilation. Why don't you talk about that more?
Yeah. Well, what happened is that in the later years, like close to the 1980s, started to peter out. A lot of the small hotels couldn't make it. They never modernized the way the larger hotels had the money to do. The older people were still going. The younger people that came back from World War II settled down, got married, had children. Yeah, that was the old days. Those were the days that their parents, that their grandparents went away, but they wanted to have something new. So what happened is that Jewish people started to be assimilated into society, and they didn't have to just go to the Catskills. Things opened up for them. So airplanes was one of them. We couldn't fly any place during World War II. They didn't have the planes. But all of a sudden, people found that they could go to Puerto Rico for a week for less money. They can go to the Catskills. Oh, we've never been to Puerto Rico before. Let's try something different. Let's go. And that was one of the things that happened with the planes. The other thing, so that was the A for airplanes, the A for assimilation. And of course, air conditioning came into effect. And a lot of people did not have to run from the heat of New York City because they had air conditioning in the homes. So I always say it's a AAA, but not the Automobile Association.
Yeah, very, very interesting. So you're not just a raconteur or a storyteller of the interesting experiences you had at the Catskills. You're also a sociologist, an anthropologist, telling us how people reacted and how behaviors were changed by the various cultural forces that we had back in the 70s, 80s, 90s as the Catskills waned. So let's take a look at your story through the various images that you've allowed us to put together in a PowerPoint. Let's take a look at that. Here we go. Can you see that, Mort?
Not yet. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, there it is. So this is something that, Mort, you do regularly. You've given lots of presentations in your area around New Jersey and other places, talking to many groups, people who love the nostalgia of it, the history, who went to the Catskills, as I did for years during those 50s and 60s, and remember some of the comedians and some of the ways things were like, who remember the Dirty Dancing kind of hotels and that wonderful movie that recaptured the flavor of the Catskills. So let's take a look. Let's start and look at some of these slides. There you are, Mort, looking good at 92. You're a handsome young man. And look at that head of hair. Yeah, really?
That picture was taken 2 years ago.
Okay. You look just as good today. And here's something that I think was prepared for you. And you see some of the comedians here and how you started working in the Catskills in 1943 as a busboy, then head busboy, then assistant salad maker. And your dad, Jack Segal, brought you into the booking entertainment business. It was the largest booking agency in the Catskills. On any Saturday night, 121 shows, necessitating the use of approximately 150 entertainers.
That
You
is
roomed with Buddy Hackett. You were
Yes.
friends with Joan Rivers. You knew
Right.
hundreds of stars. So great. Here, Mort, you were at the Wayne Library. Just an idea of how many
Yes,
perform. What?
that was one of the talks that I gave. Was at the Wayne Library.
Yep. One of the talks you gave. There's your dad.
Right.
There's your dad and you on the right. How old did your dad live to?
My dad lived until the age of 99.
Oh, wow. Well,
we were trying to push him to 100. Unfortunately, it didn't work.
but that, yeah, he almost made it. But you know, that bodes well for you. So I'll revisit.
2000.
Yeah. And here again, some articles that you sent me that show you how you're talking about the Borscht Belt, which is what they called. Does everybody know what the borscht is? A kind of a soup, a beet soup, right? Okay.
That's beet soup. It's made with beets.
And who is this? Is this your dad?
No, that was a comedian. This is one of the earlier groups of performers that worked for us in the early 1940s. It was a picture I came across. Gentleman on the very bottom, his name was Milt Ross, Ross. And I have to just say something about him, is that you never knew what style comedy would be accepted by the hotels, but he had a great singing voice, and he did Al Jolson. And if the jokes weren't going over, he'd drop down on one knee, become Al Jolson, and start singing Mammy, Mammy. Guy had the audience in his hands every time. And my sister's in that picture. All the way in the back at the very, very top is a young woman. Her name was Yvonne Murray. You'll see a picture of her later on. She was a singing comedian, stood 3 feet tall. She was considered a little person, not a midget. And then the Morrison sisters are in there. A couple of other people I can't.
Yeah. Okay.
Early picture from the 1940s.
Another, just some articles that you've collected over the time, sharing your stories.
Yeah, my father, it tells about the people my father managed. One of them was Peg Leg Bates, a one-legged tap dancer.
Right.
And of course,
now
he launched Joan Rivers, where a lot of people did not want to hire her at the time.
So you had a wonderful experience right here. Your father told Joan Rivers, stay with it, because she wasn't that successful in the Catskills, but she was very bright.
Well, what happened, and I'll tell you a couple of her stories, as I think her pictures in later on. But what happened is that we became very good friends, because my birthday was the same as hers, except I was 4 years older than she was. And she was still in her last year of college when I met her. And she was a Phi Beta Kappa. She was a very, very bright woman, and very philanthropic. I like to say that, because whatever she made, she spent a lot of it on charity. But she always wanted to do better as a comedian. And the hotels, the older Jewish hotels, really did not understand a lot of what she was saying. Her humor was too fast or too quick for them. I laughed at a lot of it, but she came back one night very disgusted. My father said to her, "You're going to make it. I don't have the type of hotels that is really for you, but you're going to make it. You stick with it." And then a few weeks later, he had a call from a yacht club in Westchester County. He sent her there, and as soon as she finished her show, he got 3 telephone calls from people saying how great she was. And so when she came back up to the Catskills, he told her, "See, I told you, you need the proper audience, the whole thing." Now, I always like to tell this from a personal point. In the mid 19.
Okay. Let's see. Some more thank you notes for speaking engagements, some more letters for your wonderful presentations. And here, your father, Jack Segal, is the Personal Managers Hall of Fame.
And that's where he got his Hall Hall of Fame award was in 5 years ago, 2016. So my father passed away in 2000, as you can see from the inscription. And that's a picture of my dad. There you go to the next one.
Right. And it talks about in this plaque for him that the movie that Woody Allen made, Broadway Danny Rose, your dad might have had some connection to it, even though it really wasn't.
Well, the thing is, I was interviewed by a couple of reporters, and I always told them, my dad.
Yeah. Okay. Here's some of the names of the various hotels. Isn't that great the way it does that? Finkelstein's. These are some of the smaller hotels that are not as famous, right? The Stevensville Lake Hotel in Swan Lake, New York. The Fieldston was owned and operated by the